You are now listening to the 21 Minutes or Less podcast, a podcast that promotes self-care for entrepreneurs. Breathe in, breathe out, relax, tune in.
Hey everybody, welcome to the latest 21 Minutes or Less podcast. I'm your host, Keisha Milana.
And I am Nakia Smith.
And today we have a special guest, and her name is Victoria West. She's actually a Canadian author and poet of Romanian descent. Her latest release, Sunset in Toronto, is currently available on Amazon right now. Sunset in Toronto will stir your emotions and connect you to experiences that connect us all. West's collection of sincere and honest poems explores different themes of life. Sunset in Toronto is divided into 3 different parts: feelings, experiences, and then places. And the poems describe the author's own life experiences from childhood to present day. So it's descriptions of love, family, loss, grief, disillusionment, immigration, and how this shapes her place in the world. Some of the poems are brought to life by photographs from the author's personal archives. And as life tells us, our experiences are a part of who we are, and the choices we are a part of us for better or worse. So these poems in Sunset for Toronto portray an honest and sensitive look into these experiences. So welcome to the podcast. How are you today?
Hello to both of you, and thank you for having me. And I'm great, thank you. I hope you're doing great as well.
Yay! So I'm so glad you could join us today. And I'm sure our audience will love if you could tell us a little bit about how did you even get into poetry and actually being able to publish and becoming a real author?
I started writing quite a long time ago in 2010. And between 2010 and 2020, I wrote about fashion. I attended fashion events in Toronto, such as Toronto Fashion Week every season, Toronto International Film Festival, and fashion events related to that festival, to the film festival, different fashion collection events, different collection launches, meeting designers, meeting different personalities from the fashion world, and being an active presence on Toronto fashion scene. So as I was attending all these beautiful and enchanting events, and I enjoyed being a part of it, I also wrote about my fashion experiences and about what I witnessed on Toronto fashion scene on my blog that I started in 2010. At the time, it was called Fashion, Style, Beauty, and More.blogspot.com, which later became victoriawest.net. So for 10 years, I wrote about fashion. And in 2013, I published my first book, which is a book dedicated to fashion. It's called Bits of Fashion, and it's a collection of fashion essays and interviews. So that was in 2013, my first book. And then I continued writing about fashion up until 2020, when Corona happened. And I started working from home, just like as many other people. And my social life downsized nearly to zero. For the last 2 years, I worked entirely from home. And to be honest, I no longer attended any more fashion events because there were any more fashion events to attend. Everything went quiet on Toronto fashion scene. So I switched my writing attention to poetry. This is during 2020, I started thinking more about poetry. I started reading poetry books, and reading those poetry books and discovering those poets and their voices made me feel inspired, starting writing my own poetry. So this is how I started writing poetry toward the end of 2020. So I kept writing about fashion, but not as involved in the actual fashion scene as before. But I started writing more poetry. And I loved reading many poetry books. I loved discovering all these amazing voices in the modern poetry. And I started writing my own poems. until I wrote enough of them to make a book. So this is how my second book, Sunset in Toronto, came to life. The book came out in October 2021. It took me about 1 year to write it. So as you already mentioned for your audience, it has 3 parts: feelings, experiences, and places. And altogether, it's a collection of 100 poems, which are divided into 3 parts. And after a year of writing poetry, I was ready to publish my book of poetry. And here it is. I published it via Kindle Direct Publishing with Amazon, and it went out last October. And I have been working on promoting it ever since and trying to make my word known to the world. So this is my story of me as a writer and a poet.
Yes, I love that you took that time to yourself to create something, because
You did,
you could
yes.
have did anything during that time, but you decided to create something that will last a lifetime and that you can pass down to people. So I wanted to ask you, like, what made you decide to do the 3 different sections and name them those 3 different things?
It's an interesting question, and I love when people ask me that. But the true story of the 3 sections is that it came to me as I was writing the book, not necessarily at the beginning when I started writing it. So I first started writing my poems, and I was adding them to the main manuscript. And I was writing them as inspiration came to me, and each poem was touching on a different theme, something that made me feel inspired on that particular day when I wrote it. And then I had this bouquet of poems touching on different themes and inspired by different moments from my life, by different experiences from my life. So after a while, after I had a few dozens of poems, or maybe half, I started seeing these distinct 3 parts in them. So this is when I decided to make the book of 3 parts. And I saw this main theme in each group of poems, and I could, just like a sculptor, the sculptor has a piece of wood in front of him or a piece of stone, and then he sees the sculpture, and then he proceeds with actually creating it. And for me, it was a little bit the other way around. I first created, and then I saw how would be the best way to group the poems in my book. So the 3 parts came to me after I had already written part of my book, and I could group those poems that I had written by that into these parts. And at that time, I decided, I would say about half through the writing of the book, that I would like the book to be grouped in these 3 parts: feelings, experiences, and places.
Yes, I love when people talk about their creative process because everybody's process is different. You said yours came to me while you was like writing, and for me, I get like visions, visualizations, and thoughts just come into my mind, and I just have to grab a pen and paper and I have to write. And then sometimes I even have like a out of body experience, like I am literally creating and I don't even realize what I created until afterwards. It's like, I created that. Like I wrote that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I love to hear people's creative processes and how they get to their, art. Because that's what it is at the end of the day. It's art.
Thank you.
Yes. And one thing that really stood out to me was the fact that, you said you were writing about your story, things you're going through, your feelings, your experiences, your places that you've been. So I just want to know, like, how do you incorporate that self-care and writing about things that are on your heart, but also like, making sure it's interesting, or do you not worry about that? Like, how does that work? Like making sure, you're not just telling a story that you think is good, but that you feel like your audience will also think is good. Like, how do you choose which memories or stories, feelings, experiences to put into the poems?
It's also a big part of the creative process, at least in my case. And the way how I choose is I love writing about positive experiences in my life, and I like passing on to that positive message that I hope to convey in my poem. And that's one criteria to choose the experiences that I let be my inspiration. Sometimes I even had to tap into my memory to search for old memories and old experiences to let them resurface to nowadays, so that I can dip into them in order to write my poem and in order to use it as an inspiration for my poem. But the bottom line is, I like to use the positive experiences from my life and put them into a creative process, into a book, into a collection of poems, because I hope the readers will relate to that positive message and to the beautiful experiences that I'm sharing with my audience. So instead of writing about some experiences that could perceive as traumatizing, I prefer to go with the positive message in my poetry.
I like that because so many people think that when you express yourself and tell about your life, that it has to come from a trauma-based place. And I overcame this, I went through this, and now look at me now. But no, there needs to be a balance. There should be a balance of positive and negative, just like in life. So I love that you chose to take the positive route instead of, just writing about maybe the traumas and challenges that you went through in your life. So I want to ask you, like, what was the experience like for you? What was like the different experience from writing about fashion and then writing about your personal life? Like, did it bring about different feelings when you was writing about both your projects?
I selected some of my childhood experiences that I wrote in my book. And just to refer to what you mentioned a second ago about the balance between the positive and negative experiences, I dedicated my book of poetry to my mother, whom I lost to heart disease 6 years ago. And I think this is where I struck that balance between the positive and negative, still turning it into a positive message, because the pain that I felt when I lost my mother was a negative experience. And what I tried to do with it is to turn it into a positive outcome that helped me process my pain and helped me deal with it. So a number of poems in the book are dedicated to my mother, and that was my way to deal with my pain, not just when it happened 6 years ago, but also my entire process of healing that I have gone through since her passing up until today, 6 years later, or 2 years ago when I started writing the book. And it was my way to heal, my way to process the pain, and my way to help me leave that pain behind and move on, and come to peace with the loss that I suffered. And these poems that in the book that are dedicated to my mother and that tap into that pain that I felt, I think many people would relate to that, because it is about losing a parent or losing your parents, which unfortunately is something that is inevitable to all of us. So we will learn to deal with it one way or another, and each of us has his or her own process of healing and their own journey, how to deal with the pain and come to peace with it. So that was for me that negative part, which I hope I found the balance with the positive one by turning it into a positive outcome. And the positive outcome for me here is the fact that I found my way to heal my pain and put it behind me and move on.
Wow, that's powerful. I feel like, writing is something that's definitely therapeutic for me too. I feel like that, typically right now I just journal, but I do think that it's value in sharing your story, and maybe one day I'll write a book. I feel like, it's a way to be having your story live on and your legacy, or just things about yourself. So I feel like it's valuable, especially for, if you have kids or when you want future generations to understand the times, like what you were going through in these times. And then you also said you were a fashion blogger. So I wanted to ask you about that. Like, that seems like a career that it probably would be hard to get into. So can you tell some of our audience about, like, how do you get into the fashion industry and getting invited to events and, even if it's not fashion, just blogging, how do you make that profitable?
So when I started blogging about fashion, even the blogging media was a little bit different in 2010 than it is now. But for someone who would like to start now, I would say a couple of advice that I could give is find a unique voice to write your fashion blog, a unique perspective that would help you stand out from the other fashion bloggers. And in order to get invited to different events, I have to admit it's not an easy thing to break that ice. But there are a few tricks that can be applied here. For me, for example, what worked for me is I started attending fashion events by searching them online. They would be, there are different fashion forums and different fashion sources that announce various events in your area. Even Eventbrite probably is one of those places where you can find events and register to attend such events. Another way to do that is to attend those events that charge an entrance fee, because most of the time it is an affordable fee, so it wouldn't break anyone's bank. But once on that scene, it's a great opportunity for you to network with other people, to meet other fashion professionals, to meet other fashion lovers and writers and everyone on the fashion scene. So that's another way to do that. And also a great way to make connections is to build a relationship with the PR professionals. And it's enough one of them to get in contact with you or start building a relationship with one of them, that the word of mouth then goes around, and then you will get the opportunity to meet other PR professionals, and they will connect you with their brands, of their fashion, of their clients who are fashion designers, fashion professionals, celebrities on the fashion scene, and so on. So just a few tips that worked for me back in 2010 when I started. It may be different now, but the basics are more or less the same. So, and don't be afraid to put yourself out there. Don't be afraid to contact people. Don't be afraid to show what you can do, what you're doing. Don't be afraid what you've got to show, and so on, to show that. And the things will take off from there.
Yes, I love that. As you were talking, I kept hearing intentional. It seemed like you was very intentional about the steps and relationships and the events that you were going to. And you went there with a purpose, and you wasn't going just to be going or going just to have a good time. Yeah, that was a byproduct of it, but you had the intention of like building your brand, building your business, building your relationships and reputation with the people that you saw yourself working with. So I love that. I don't have anything else to add, but I do want to leave with a quote or an affirmation, if you want to say. But the affirmation is, my positive thoughts guide me to new heights. So, when she was talking about like using this opportunity to write about positive things, the affirmation came to my mind. So I just wanted to leave out on that affirmation.
Sounds great. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We really, really appreciate it talking to you. We really appreciate learning about your book, Sunset in Toronto. Audience, definitely go get it. Go check it out if you enjoy poetry, or if you just want to get into more about, feelings and experiences of, Victoria West. And can you please tell our audience where they can find you on social media?
Yes. So I can be found on Instagram, and my handle is Victoria West and Books with _ in between words. Also, I can be found on Facebook. I have a page on Facebook that's called writer Victoria West, and it can be easily found if you simply search in Facebook search box writer Victoria West, or it can also be easily found by typing facebook.com/writer Victoria West. And these two are my main social media handles. I also have my blog, my website, victoriawest.net, and I update all the news on the blog as they come along. And it's easily found as well. My book is also can be seen on Amazon simply by searching Victoria West Sunset in Toronto, and the book is available in both print and Kindle editions. Kindle is part of Kindle Unlimited, and the book is available, actually both of my books, also Bits of Fashion, on all Amazon sites around the world, but definitely on Amazon.com and Amazon.ca, of course.
Yes, thank you. Definitely go follow her, check her out, and, stay updated with her latest books and creations. And also make sure you go follow us and our social media pages. Our name is at 21 Minutes or Less on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. And then you can go follow our personal pages. Mine is at Keisha Milana.
And mine is at Miss Butterfly 21, MISS.
Yes. And thank you so much for joining our episode today. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.